Steven, you cursed us. I I think that this will go up out of order, but when we finally finish recording all of our videos for Innsmouth, the Innsmouth conspiracy cards, which followed all of our videos for the Investigator starter deck cards, you said, watch, the taboo list will come out tomorrow. That's exactly what happened.
I mean, I am a mystic, so, I could prophesy.
That is one explanation. So yeah, this is Optimal Play. I'm Brandon.
I'm Steven.
And we're here a little bit, I think, anachronistically. To talk about the taboo list updates for Arkham Horror, the card game. If you're unfamiliar, the List of Taboos is something that comes out with the game's FAQ, along with rules clarifications and that kind of thing. And it's an optional, but at least for us, we highly encourage it. Way to tweak the game to be a little bit more balanced. It addresses issues with broken combos, cards that are just too powerful. Even a few cards that are not powerful enough have been actually adjusted on here. So we're going to take a look at the whole list, particularly what changed this week. And I think this video will go up soon, probably before our Innsmouth conspiracy videos, which means there might be a little bit of us speculating about this in those videos, despite this already having happened. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Any before we dive into the details, are you happy with the update?
Mostly.
What are your first thoughts?
It leaned pretty heavily into XP. I was kind of looking forward to if there were any interesting mutations, just because I think that those are a bit more interesting. That being said,
right.
Maybe it's not great practice to do that too much, because it does make it a little more complicated. You have to remember that, this card works a different way, whereas XP, you just worry about in deck building. So I get the logic there.
Right, yeah, and so if you're not familiar, the list calls it chaining cards if they have their experience cost increased, and mutating cards if their function changed. And yeah, I think we can look at a couple of examples. I think we'll come across a couple as we go that probably that at least I think would have been better mutated. But I completely agree. The more that you change the function of cards, the more it becomes something that you have to remember while you're playing, because what the cards do is kind of different from what's literally printed on the cards. So I get avoiding that, but I don't think that XP cost adjustments were the right answer for every single card on this list.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also got our first forbidden card, which I think we'll hit at the end. That has always been a blank portion of the list where cards are outright banned by the taboo list. So we'll talk about that when we get there. My main thought is this is yet another big seeker nerf, right?
And they definitely needed it.
Oh yeah,
they were so efficient. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's wild because Seekers are, maybe with some exceptions where they manage to get a little bit of damage or something out, they're maybe the least well-rounded class, right? They're kind of the hardest to solo because they just don't have a lot of cards that deal with enemies very well. And yet, they still just bring so much efficiency at what they're good at that it's it's making everyone else generally feel like they're not doing as much for their team as the Seeker is. And so, yeah, I think that's what this is targeting a lot here.
Well, I think you can't really go too hard into clues. If you have a little bit too much cluing in your group, that still accelerates things as long as you can deal with monsters. There's almost always clues that can be gotten. Whereas if you lean too heavily into enemy management, sometimes there are just no enemies. And so that's why maybe a really dedicated Kluver is an even more overpowering thing for your group than a really dedicated fighter. Because there's a limit to how much fighting you can do.
It's true, because getting clues is generally how you actually move the game towards ending sooner. And that's one way to manage enemies, is end the game before they can spawn, right? So in a way, yeah, there's always something for them to do. And if they do it really well, then there's not even that many other threats necessarily. All right, well, let's get into the details. So we've actually pulled up, and I'll link to it in the YouTube description. We've pulled up a PDF that Fantasy Flight put out of the cards on the taboo list modified in the ways the list does, with their XP cost printed on them or that kind of thing. And so we are looking at that. I've got it here on my iPad. You've got the Machete right there. So we're going to just go in the order that they're on this PDF, and well, I'll hopefully be able to get this PDF in some form onto the screen so you can follow with us, or you can follow that link and join us too. So first up is actually the Machete, which this got some of its chains removed. Right? This is the guardian weapon that it's melee, and it just fights for +1 in combat, +1 damage as long as you're only engaged with one enemy, or with the one enemy you're attacking. It's a very strong guardian weapon that got increased from 0 to 2 on a previous version of the list and got brought back down to 1. How do you feel on this?
I don't think it matters too much. I think either way, you're not starting it with it in your deck. And I do think Enchanted Blade was kind of a nice card that came out around the same time Machete got tabooed. And so you're going to be starting with Enchanted Blade. Maybe you'll switch it to Machete, but you might actually, well, the only problem is if you ever upgrade out of Machete, you've sort of lost that XP.
Right. Yeah, you don't have that. You don't have that upgrade path out of it and into something else.
So yeah, I still bet a lot of people won't take it, but I think it's totally fine if you do.
Yeah, I was actually of the opinion that 2 was fine for, like, Machete's great. Machete compares actually for some investigators in some situations favorably to Time Worn Brand, which is a level 5 card that costs 5 experience to play, I think. The only difference is that Time Worn Brand gives you +1 combat compared to the Machete, but then it doesn't have this rider of you want to only be engaged with the one enemy. So that's where the trade-off is. But I think, like, with that comparison, with Machete being nearly as good as Time Worn Brand, 2 seemed fine for me.
Well, there have also been a lot more Evadie investigators that have come out recently. You had Stella and Winifred are both good at evading, and in Innsmouth, the rogue is good at evading. So the spy, Trish. So that if you are playing with Evadie characters, it does make Machete a little bit worse because you don't get the +1 damage attacking exhausted enemies.
Right, good point. Unless you were to spend the action to engage them, in which case, why did they even evade it? Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe the way people are playing in multiplayer has changed to include more evading enemies as a way of managing them, and then Machete doesn't stack up as well there. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, yeah, I think to me this is still this is one of my, even having not really played it since it was tabooed, this is one of my most played cards of all time, just because of how it went into every deck for so long. So I still am kind of happy to look in other directions.
Yep.
Keep things interesting. Elusive is still on the list. It hasn't changed here, so it has +2 experience because it is extremely good. And then we get to what I think might be the main event. Want to share this one with us?
Yeah, Pathfinder. Goes from 1 XP to now being 3, and it's chained. So that does mean that if you can have Seeker level 0 through 2, you can still play it because it's still a level 1 card.
Correct.
Costs 3 XP. This seems like pretty important. Like, Pathfinder was so efficient. I think we reviewed multiple Seeker movement cards that were just this sucks compared to Pathfinder. Yeah.
I think that we've been saying, I think, throughout our all the videos that we've had coming out in the last couple months, this is good with Pathfinder for now. We really expected this. I think if I had to bet money on one thing that would be hit by the taboo list, it was Pathfinder. And I think one of the many pieces of evidence for that was that, the new Esoteric Atlas came out, and it's just moving two spaces for an action is just not very good, not great compared to removing 1 for 0 actions. And also Farsight it's a free action to play an event, but you're still comparing it free action asset to free action asset, and that one just did not seem nearly as good as Pathfinder, and it was higher level. So finally, maybe this is a little bit more broad in line to where some of these other cards can be considered. I still think you'll probably spend 3 experience on it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's the only, I guess, other than Farsight, which just came out, and I don't know yet kind of how feasible it is to make that work. In general, Seekers are not great on actions. Like they're more about using your 3 actions to get a lot of clues, and they're not as good at getting actions as rogues, obviously, but even a lot of like mystics have Marie gets action, stuff like that. In general, seekers, it's more about using your 3 actions really efficiently.
Right.
And so if they also have a really efficient 4th and 5th action with 2 Pathfinders, it's a little too much.
Yeah, if this card had been mutated, I could have seen it becoming limit 1 per deck or something, just because you can play 2 of these, and they just, you can move twice per turn.
I am glad that they didn't just do limit 1 per deck, because then it just makes it like this one auto include that's like always your first XP.
Yeah.
And to me...
And then it's very swingy if you sit at the bottom of your deck. It's a lot. You're going to have very much stronger and much weaker games depending on whether you draw it, if that's the case. So yeah, this was maybe a better change than that would have been. Yeah. So I'm excited to see. Like, I actually think it's a very good question now. One thing that I was wondering is, do I want Pathfinder in my deck now, or do I want Shortcut 2, which is the event that attaches to a location, provides a free move through that location, and it exhausts the event, so it's once per round, but your whole team can use it. Right?
I'm a big fan of Shortcut 2. I think before you could obviously play it with Pathfinder, but now, yeah, there might be some decks that you play it instead of Pathfinder.
Yeah,
I think it really varies scenario to scenario. There's some where it's amazing, like Blob, which is very like there's central locations that you go through a lot. Shortcut 2 is amazing. Other ones that are a little bit more linear and you don't do as much backtracking, it might only be 1 or 2 actions. But it's a cool card, and I think it's kind of more fun because you have to think about where do I put it, and
I agree.
How will I use it this turn, and then my teammate uses it the next turn?
Yeah. Who gets to use it? How it changes their turns? Right. It's a really interesting card. I think just a more interesting and a more skill testing card than Pathfinder is.
Yeah.
So I hope it gets more play as a result of this. Okay, next on the list is the Switchblade, which I believe stays the same. The level 2 Switchblade, which got +1 experience. It's just a very effective, repeatable, no ammo weapon. So, kind of like Machete. Like, it just at some point there was an evaluation that weapons without ammo are very, very good. So several of them ended up here. So now maybe we can just talk about these all at the same time. We get to the 3 permanent talents that were on the list of taboos. Higher Education, which is the Seeker, the Seeker permanent talent. Streetwise, which is the Rogue permanent talent. And Scrapper, which is the Survivor permanent talent. They were at +5 experience for the first 2, and was it +2 or +3 for Scrapper?
I think
now
it was
I can't
2.
remember.
I think it was 2.
Okay. But they all got brought down a little to where now Higher Education and Streetwise are +3 experience for 6 total in order to buy them. And Scrapper is at +1 for 4 total. We definitely felt like when they went on the list, it was justified. But do you agree that maybe it was overshot and this brings it in line, or what do you think?
It's definitely. I don't think it was crazy to give them so much XP to begin with. I mean, I think permanents. I think we just talked about this. Permanents in general have been undercosted XP wise because you're paying XP for a card that starts in play, as opposed to like paying XP for a card that you might never draw.
That you might draw or might not.
Yeah. So it's almost like, they should all be like exceptional or something, like just to, because of the fact that you're actually getting way more out of it than like a regular card upgrade. So, and we've also seen, Higher Ed was actually most popular before Big Hand Seeker was a playstyle. So it's actually going to be really interesting now that Big Hand is a playstyle and there's decks that like are immediately over 5 cards. Does a 6 XP Higher Ed become really good because you're so far over the hand limit?
The thing is, this isn't a big hand card. This is a medium hand card. Like the reason Higher Education is so strong is all Seekers can have enough card draw that they can easily keep their hand this big. Unless they're really, really burning through their cards for their icons or something. And I almost think that if this card were printed today, it might have been part of that big hand archetype that's been developing. I've been playing some of it. It's been not great, but it's fun. I enjoy it. Anyway, I feel like if this was printed today, it would have said while you have 10 or more cards in hand, right? Like make it a challenge. Make it you have to grow your hand size, or have Dream Diary putting this extra card in your hand at the start of your turn, that kind of thing, so that it's an actual hoop to jump through. Whereas 5 cards in your hand just never was challenging.
Yeah.
And then I think that this would have been both more fair at its original or lower than 8 experience cost, and it would have been more interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is worth noting that Milan is still mutated, so that truly overpowered, like every time I investigate, I have enough money to get +2 intellect on my next investigate. At least that is still not possible.
That's true. Yeah. That was always part of it, was Seekers were so good at getting money because of Dr. Milan, and he has not changed. What about Streetwise? This is something that rogues were pretty much always buying. It's a little different. It costs 2 resources to even use, so you've got to have a pretty good income. But it is effective then, 2 resources for +3 of a skill.
Streetwise is like pretty necessary for Preston. So like that was the one unfortunate thing about it being 8 XP, is that it's like such a foundational card for him. Yeah, I do actually really like the new Streetwise that came out in Winifred. That costs 0. It only boosts the stats by 2 instead of by 3. But the fact that it costs 0 to put into play is pretty cool.
What level was that? A level 0 card?
It's a level 0 card. Yeah. Okay. So now I think Preston can start with that, and then only need 6 XP now to get this. So I think it's fine. Maybe. I actually don't feel like rogues in general are like super overpowered, so it's probably okay.
Yeah. And then Scrapper was all like, these permanent talents are all strong, so it was inarguably strong. But I didn't feel like people were really playing it, so we were surprised when it went on the taboo list.
I agree. The one thing Scrapper has going for it is that survivors are the Dark Horse faction, and so having really on-demand ways to get your money down to 0 is very strong. I don't see a lot of people doing this, but I'm actually a big fan of playing Scrapper and Plucky, which is the fast talent that has a horror soak on it.
Yeah, it's the Composure, right? I think is what those were called.
No one plays the Composures.
No.
I don't play the other Composures, but I actually think the Survivor one is good because it boosts the other 2 stats. And so if you have Scrapper and Plucky, any test you can boost, get down to 0 for Dark Horse. Plus, obviously, you've gotten the boost from actually increasing your stats. So it actually turns your Survivor into like pretty good at everything. So I am actually kind of a fan of that combo. So I don't think that they should have totally removed the chains from Scrapper, even though it's not a super commonly played card.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because that's what I was gonna say, was why not just remove this from the list? Adding +1 to a level 3 card, like just the move from level 3 to level 4 just feels not that significant, to where it's like, it's almost like, why is it on this at that point?
That's true. I would say I wouldn't put a level 3 card as one chain if it wasn't already on there. But like once it's on there, I feel like it doesn't simplify things that much.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, so this is maybe kind of my last thought, is this also, one of the stated intents of the taboo list is to have a little bit of an evolving kind of meta, or for lack of a better term, meta game, which is kind of describes what people at large in the community are, how they're building their deck. So by bringing this so high that no one's going to use them, and then bringing them back down, like it gave us like a year without these, and now maybe kind of reintroduces them in. So this is maybe trying to deliver on that promise.
They also just released the 0 XP Scrapper in Stella, so I think that one actually serve your purpose for a while too.
Yeah, and so there's a little. These are kind of back in the limelight, which is maybe part of the reason it makes sense to bring them down a little, bring their costs down a little, not their power level. Speaking of why is it on this list, the Springfield is still here. It's got -1 experience, so making it cost 3 instead of 4. still a pretty bad card. Any feel
Yeah,
free to read the next
I
card unless you have anything to add.
don't. I do not. Next card is Flamethrower. This goes from 5 XP to 6. So the first, well, I guess maybe there's an exceptional card that adds up to 6, potentially.
Yeah, I think Stick to the Plan is exceptional level 3. So.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one makes sense to me. It never really made sense why both Lightning Gun and Flamethrower were 5 XP when Lightning Gun does 9 damage and Flamethrower does 16 damage. Like, that just seems a lot better. There is a little bit of weirdness, like that you can only attack enemies engaged with you, but it also has some advantages, like you can spread the damage around, which you can't do with Lightning Gun. So overall, it just seems a lot better than Lightning Gun, and like probably the strongest weapon in the game.
Yeah, I'm similar to some of the past ones. I'm a little surprised that the developers would bother to put this on the list just to tweak it by 1, just because it's not that big a difference. But, from 5 to 6, 5 is something that you can pick up because you got 5 experience on a scenario. You're starting to get to kind of unusual territory that you're getting 6 or more experience per scenario. So at 6, it does mean you're maybe having to really have your sights on it and save up for it, which I guess feels a little different. But yeah, overall, this is a very small adjustment in its power level.
Yeah, probably could have had to.
I guess, is 6 the highest? I think with Higher Education and Streetwise brought down, I think nothing goes higher than 6 right now, except for some of the rogue exceptional cards that have not been adjusted.
Yeah, I think Pocket Watch is 8.
Like some exceptional cards go up there. But yeah, I don't think anything has chained higher than 6, which is interesting.
Yep.
Okay, next was Drawing Thin, which went on the taboo list last time. It's a very powerful and convoluted to play Survivor card that, I'm glad it's still here. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, still super overpowered.
Yeah.
But then we get to, I think, the other one besides Pathfinder that we were all waiting for, which is Mr. Rook, which goes from 0 XP to 4. I think for a non-permanent, that's the biggest change that we've seen, right?
I think so. I think it's the biggest taboo change ever. Yeah. Other than those permanents. Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's weird. Seekers never had XP allies. Maybe they just, for some reason, wanted that to be a theme. But like, clearly, this should have just been a 3 or 4 XP ally to begin with, since it is way, way too strong.
Yes. Yeah. Very strong. He's got good health and sanity. And then the search to draw 3 times, fast every time, and the ability now with the increasing amount of ways to put more secrets on your assets. And you've pointed out on multiple occasions too that the ability to have some control over when you draw your weakness, like getting it out of the way, like that's obviously intended to be his downside, is that if you search and see a weakness, you have to draw it. And so often it's not even a downside.
Absolutely. It's something I've actually seen in a number of card games where an overpowered card is printed with what they think is like a downside. Like in Netrunner, it'll happen where there's like a card that maybe gives the corporation like draw and money. And they think like, oh, well, the draw is kind of a downside because there are some times in Netrunner where the corporation doesn't want to draw. But still, like 80% of the time, they do actually want to draw. And so, like a card that gives draw and money to a corporation, very, very strong. And this is another one of those examples where, they thought it was going to be a downside that you would get your weakness, but it's a fast action that you can do at any time. So, like, if you're worried about getting your weakness that causes a horror at the end of your turn, you can literally end your turn and Mr. Rook during your teammate's turn. Like, there's so many ways that being a fast action and also searching. So, like, if you see multiple weaknesses, you can pick the one that's better.
Oh, you choose which one? Yeah. Because you only draw one weakness.
So, I actually think that part is overall a positive.
It's as simple as you can draw your weakness at the start of your turn fast, so you have 3 actions to deal with it. Or at the start of the game when, like, Harvey would love to get his weakness out of the way while his hand is 5 cards, not 15 cards,
One of my favorite things about playing Norman is, so he has Seeker and Mystic, and his at least the promo version has a monster weakness with 2
Mhm.
hit points. You can literally, Mr. Rook, find your weakness as you are already planning to Storm of Spirits, and then you kill the weakness enemy as like part of the Storm of Spirits.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It was super broken. Um, I know this had its defenders for where it was, but yeah, I think this is well justified. I will not be surprised if in a future taboo list it gets brought down a little bit, just because not being level 0 is itself a pretty big um is a pretty big change, to where this could be 2 experience and it would still keep it out of level 0 decks and still make people have to consider whether they're going to buy it. So I could see it inching down, but I think 4 is justified, and I think Mandy will still gladly pay 4 for it, and some others will too.
yeah. I think the big thing is there were a lot of ways that you could imagine mutating this. And so uh, I think that this is a good way to balance it, but it's like I was kind of enjoying like the speculation in terms of what the mutation would be.
Yeah,
One that I thought of was like if you find a weakness, you don't get another card.
sure.
That might make you consider not always looking for 9.
Yeah,
And it would bring it back to what may have been the original intent, which was to like hope to not draw your weakness.
right,
Um,
right. I thought the obvious thing was make it an action instead of fast to exhaust him in search. I
yeah,
think he still would have been very strong, but that way you're spending 3 resources and 3 actions to get all these draws instead of 3 resources and 0 actions. There's a big difference there.
yeah, and that way, to use one example, if you had a weakness that was like bad at the end of your turn,
Mm-hmm.
but you also had like a weakness like narcolepsy that's like bad at the beginning of your turn, like it would actually be like really tough to decide when to
Right.
do it. Whereas now you just search on someone else's turn, and there's almost never a downside to searching
Yeah.
at someone. Like I think I played narcolepsy with Mr. Rook, and it was just like never a deal at all because I would always Rook on someone else's turn, and if I got narcolepsy, they literally just have to spend 1 action to wake me up. So
Mm-hmm.
it totally like neutered that weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Seeker Apocalypse, a Seecalypse. I like Seeker Apocalypse. Anyway, it continues with Knowledge is Power. A much more, well, somewhat more recent. This was Circle Undone. Oh, I guess Mr. Rook was too. For some reason, I feel like Knowledge is Power is a very recent card, and Mr. Rook has been around for a while, but I'm apparently wrong. Anyway, it is the free, fast event that either chooses a tome or spell in play or in your hand and resolves an ability on it with cost at fast speed. And it has, not that you would do this very often, but has the option to then discard that asset if it was in your hand and draw a card to replace it. Um, it got chained with +2 experience. I wonder if that's too low. This card is pretty bonkers.
So I've never really seen this card abused. Like I've played it in Daisy, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like a good, solid card, and it's really fun. But it never felt to me like, oh man, this is like super overpowered. It was more like, oh wow, there's like some fun combo that this enables me to do, and maybe it saves my bacon in this specific situation, but uh, it wasn't. It didn't feel crazy overpowered to me. Um, so I'm a little bummed
Hmm.
that I think probably because of 1 or 2 degenerate interactions that like this really fun card um, is now tabooed. I think it's gonna be hard in a non-degenerate deck maybe to justify it, but I don't know. Maybe you still will.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was, even if you're not trying to do degenerate things with it, like having this with a shriveling in your hand and being able to not necessarily needing to play your shriveling because you just know you have this, and if an enemy appears, you can get fast damage out for free, is extremely powerful. Like, I think that if you have an asset that deals damage, this is better than any of the Guardian damage events that came with Nathaniel's deck. Um, it's, I don't know, it's pretty bonkers, and I think if you compare it to, although Seeker has some overcost, actually I think Arkham Horror in general has a lot of like overcosted events on experience. There's a lot of events that are hard to justify spending their experience on. So maybe this is fine at 2, but if you compare it to like what other events do, I think that this lines up with plenty of 3, 4, or 5 cost events.
Yeah, I guess I mean part of it is it's almost only applies to a subset of Seeker Mystics. Like I've never seen this in any character that wasn't Seeker Mystic. So
Yeah.
it didn't feel too like prevalent
Hmm.
in the way that
True.
some, you know, Mr.
Yeah.
Rook and Pathfinder do. You know, I've seen it a lot in Daisy. I think you can play it in like Luke. If you wanted to spend one of your Seeker slots in Marie, you could certainly play it in
Yeah.
her. But I certainly never saw it in like any other Seekers that didn't have access to Mystic. That might have
Hmm.
changed with Necronomicon, but until that, I never saw it.
Yeah, with the Necronomicon, because this lets you just do 3 damage by channeling the Necronomicon's ability. Um, Also with the, I don't know if this is game breakingly powerful or anything, but the new Forbidden Tomes, this, and I checked actually, and my understanding is that this does let you use one of their quadruple action abilities from your hand without needing the big hand size or anything like that. And those are not ridiculous. They are either move and discover a clue or uh, heal someone a damage and deal a damage. So like it's not insane, but if you just have a few of those in your deck to where this not only does those things for 0 cost and fast, but is flexible and can do maybe one of several of those things as you need, it's just one of the strongest cards in the game. I really do think that.
It's extremely similar to Sleight of Hand. Like they're both cards that are fast, that help you when you don't have a weapon out, that help you save ammo.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton of similarities there. It is kind of interesting that with Sleight of Hand, they chose to mutate it so that you couldn't put out as awesome weapons. They could have done something like that here, where it was like you can't use it on like a Shriveling 5 or Necronomicon, like have an XP restriction or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, that definitely would have been one way to address it. And you're right. I think I'd agree that that would be fine. That most of the things that this is so strong with are leveled up cards. But yeah, it just seems to be um, erring on the side of chaining rather than mutating is kind of the
Mm-hmm.
pattern.
Yep.
We're not done with Seeker yet.
Yeah, so Segment of Onyx has also been chained to be +3 experience. The way that this works with Myriad is you just pay the +3 experience once.
Mm-hmm.
So this will now cost 4 XP. You get all 3 Segment of Onyxes, which then combine to become the Pendant of the Queen, which is a very powerful, fast clue discovery and evasion card.
And teleporter, I think. Isn't it?
Yes,
Isn't it
yeah,
choose a location and either move there, discover a clue, or evade an enemy at that
I think
location?
so.
And it works on elite enemies. Um, Very, very strong card. Again, it has a downside. It's that you have to find all the pieces and assemble them. Um, but honestly, I'm curious with Mr. Rook tabooed whether this needed to be tabooed because I think Mr. Rook was a huge part of how people reliably find the pieces.
So there were broken Mandy decks that I think only used 9 XP. So I think like if you add what 8 more, 17,
Mm-hmm.
if you could like do that, that's still super duper strong.
Yeah.
I mean, part of why this card is so powerful is that some of these Mandys are cycling their deck like almost, or well, actually, they don't even have to cycle their deck because I think the cards get reshuffled into the deck. Like they can basically assemble the 3
Yes.
segments.
Yeah, when
Like
you use up the pendant, the segments get shuffled back into your deck. Which, if you line that up when you're with your card being 4 cards in size or something, your deck rather being 4 cards in size, you just draw them all again and do it again.
yeah.
That has always felt pretty broken.
So yeah, Mandys were able to like reassemble these pendants, you know,
Yeah,
8 times in a game or something, which is pretty crazy. Uh,
yeah. This has never felt too ridiculous to me in Mandy, but also I always play 50 card Mandy because I'm a moron. So so that's probably why.
yeah, I the whole choose 30, 40, or 50 card thing seems really, really cool when Mandy came out, and now it's just kind of like, well, do you want to be janky or do you want to be good?
Yeah.
Because like clearly 30 card is by far the best.
Which, surprise, surprise, building a deck of the minimum deck size is the way to go in a card game.
Yeah.
People thought that maybe, or you might think that because there are weaknesses in your deck that get diluted, that kind of thing, that would not be so much the case, but still is the case.
Yeah.
And then maybe kind of both most and least surprising for different reasons. The new Necronomicon, Petrus de Dacia translation, is on this list, chained with +3 experience. So actually, I spoke too soon. There is an 8 on the list now, and this is it. So what's surprising here is that this card came out mere weeks ago, right? It came out in Harvey's pack, which was in late August, and it's now mid-October. So like 6 weeks later, bam. What do you think?
I saw a lot of people saying that like they were expecting an errata that this would exhaust.
Yeah, that was my expectation. Honestly, I feel like that's practically a typo. It seems like so obviously the way to fix this.
And the explanation was, oh, there's not enough like space on the card to like write exhaust. Which, to be honest, it had never even occurred to me that like the space on tabooed cards really mattered because I've never like printed out new versions or anything.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe a little bit.
Oh, that's an interesting point, that maybe that explains why it wasn't printed that way, is that there wasn't space to put exhaust on each of these, but it does not explain why it couldn't be tabooed that way. Right?
Well, but it sounds like, though, that they are taking these PDFs of the like tabooed cards seriously.
Yeah, and they do look nice. Like, I'm happy to have them.
Yeah, so they are actually thinking about like how much can we fit in this tabooed version.
Sure. I'm trying to remember. Oh, shoot. There's a card. Is it in? Now I'm totally blanking. There's a card that has like a menu of choices in, I think, one of the Investigator starter decks, and I really admired. I wished that I had said at the time. I wish I had complimented its templating, like the way the card fits so much in with his like organized bullet point list. Oh, okay, I remember it now. It's the well, now I can't remember. It's the tome that gives you the 5, 10, or 15 cards bonuses.
It's like the Calypso or something like that.
I literally played my big hand Seeker deck today, and I can't remember the name of this now. Anyway, I really was very impressed with the way it started a sentence and then had the bullet points like ... end of the sentence if you have 5, 10, 15. So I feel like this could have done something like that here for space. It said, exhaust the Necronomicon and ... spend 1 secret for this, spend 2 secrets for this. Like, I feel like they could have solved that. I don't know. That's just me, but and I do love that was something new that I have not seen in a card game's templating before. So yeah, that is something that on that card whose name off the top of my head I am missing. I really loved.
Yeah, the other nerf here is it is a limit 1 per deck. So honestly, you probably want to have 2 copies of Mr. Rook before you pay for this. Otherwise,
to make sure you're getting it. Yeah.
So it's basically you have to have at least 16 XP to find this reliably.
Yeah, well, and I think we haven't touched on the main reason it got tabooed yet, and yes, exhausting it would make it, so I like exhausting because it would make it work more like you think, like most tomes exhaust when you use them. It's strange to play an asset and be able to just blow through all its charges all at once with no actions. But then also this card worked with Sleight of Hand, so you could drop it into play, use all its secrets, return it to play. Scavenging and other kinds of recursion would get it back, and yeah, you might have to pay for it again, but it's well worth it because it's so powerful, right? Like, I think that's what it was actually.
Knowledge's Power was another combo that
yes,
actually making it exhaust would not have helped with that because it wouldn't when you did Knowledge's Power.
Yeah, but yeah, Knowledge's Power was very, very strong with almost any of these. Pretty much anything but the spend 1 secret ability was a very strong thing to Knowledge's Power. Yeah, so I think that was where the big problem lied, and exhausting would have fixed most of those too. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we touched on it. Like, I think that this as a build-around card was why it was so busted. And it's kind of the criticism of the chaining thing is that when you raise the price, it just means that if you're going to build around it, you're still going to build around it and drop those XP. But if you were just going to play it kind of for fun and to get it kind of as it appears on its face, it's a lot less in your reach.
Yeah, although I mean, if you're just like, I just want to get this some games and use it once, you maybe don't need Mr. Rook and Knowledge is Power. So then it'd be a
Yeah,
lot less.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Still, 8 feels like a hefty amount.
I mean, yeah, there will be games when you potentially don't ever find it, and then that's gonna feel bad.
Yeah. Okay, so scrolling a little further, Dr. Milan Christopher, one of the original Taboo inhabitants, is still here and still mutated to exhaust when you use him. Rex remains the only investigator on the Taboo list. His power to discover an extra clue is limit once per round. I'm scrolling through a few of these quick. Delve too deep is still limit 2 in the victory display.
So quick thinking actually got a change.
Yes, this one's new, right?
It's not new.
It was on the list before, but the nature of its changed.
Yeah, before it was, I think, limit 1 per test, which was there so you couldn't like all commit quick thinkings, I guess, and get like a million extra actions. Now it's I believe it's max once per round. Turn, which so they said that the reason for this was that they didn't want Amanda Sharp to get like infinite actions.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
Which makes sense.
It's kind of a stretch because, or the only reason that it's a little out there of a change is because Amanda had to buy Versatile in order to get this in her deck, right? Like she can't put this rogue card in her deck naturally. But if she jumps through those hoops, then she can have infinite turns, right? As long as she keeps getting passing by 2 or more. Then this goes into all of her skill tests for a turn, is how Amanda works, and she would just have infinite, not infinite, but she would get to keep taking actions until she fails to succeed by 2, 3, or however many actions she has times.
Yeah, and the
pretty
fact
busted.
That you would get 2, you could fail twice, and your turn would still be going. So you could potentially even like fail your first 2, but then go on a run where you get like 10 in a row that you succeed by 2. So
yeah,
it sounds fun, but yeah, it's pretty busted.
So it's an edge case, but you know, it's one of those things that if you showed up at a game store to play at an organized event or Arkham Nights or something, and some stranger sat down with an infinite Amanda deck, you'd like not have that much fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun for the person playing it though.
Yeah, exactly. So glad that's changed. Ace in the Hole, I don't think has changed.
Nope.
That is still max once per round. Sleight of Hand did get a tweak.
Yeah, so this one used to be 1 hand, and is now level 0 through 3 item. Could be 1 or 2-handed.
Yeah, it's funny because this also, I think the Necronomicon was one of the big combos that this addresses, because the Necronomicon's a level 5 asset, so Sleight of Hand just simply doesn't work with it now. I guess it's just for, like, I can't even think of what other level 4 or 5 assets are super strong with this.
There's tons of guns that if you didn't have that,
one-handed guns.
Well, but it's not one-handed anymore.
Well, I just mean the previous version versus this version.
I see.
Yeah.
So I mean, so stuff that this can now do that the other one couldn't would be like the level 3 Thompson. Is a pretty decent one.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm not sure what else this is why this change happened other than the Necronomicon off the top of my head. I can see how this card can, and probably even with this version, continues to be a challenge to designing new cards. Every time they design an item, they got to be like, all right, what happens if someone plays Sleight of Hand? how much does the game break? So I kind of expect this to eventually be forbidden.
Yeah.
Because I think that's we'll get to the card that's forbidden. I think it's the last one on the list. But I think that's the main reason that one is forbidden, is because it just makes it too hard. They just have to constantly design around it. And
it's tough because there's already 2 weapons, Cult Vest Pocket and Lupara, that are like designed to be Sleight of Handed.
True.
So like you're almost banning 3 cards if you ban it.
Yeah.
So probably try their hardest not to.
Yeah, they could always forbid this and print a new one that works with only rogue cards or only firearms, or right. Like there's some.
Well, then you might as well.
But then again, you might as well mutate this. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, well, I expect this to change every taboo list for the foreseeable future. The Key of Ease is still a very strong card that was turned exceptional, and I don't know about you, I've never spent 10 XP on it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's still good if you do. All In is new on this list. It's a level 5. It's a level 5 rogue skill that has you draw a card for each point you succeeded by up to 5, shuffling any weaknesses back in. The mutated part on this is that it now gets removed from the game, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why this. The story with most of the rogue cards is that there were broken infinite combos or whatever that this worked with. Is that the case here? Do you know?
Yeah, there must be. I've never seen it. I feel like it would be kind of hard to like cycle Winifred like super often because she doesn't have a lot of assets, so like her deck is always going to be fairly large.
Mm-hmm.
I guess could you copycat it? But you can only copycat someone else's, right? So like you'd have to be playing like a team of rogues that were like copycatting each other's all-ins or something.
Yeah, I'm sure it's out there. That has to be why this is, right? Like this isn't a card that on its face reads as anything too crazy, especially for level 5. It's funny. It's a funny little summary of why of kind of how Seekers and Rogues work and how where a lot of their power lies. That a lot of Seeker cards got put on this list because they're just too strong. They're just too efficient. They just win the game too fast or make other players feel like they're not able to keep up. And then the rogue cards are mostly here because like, oh, that one accidentally gives you 74 actions, or this one draws your deck, or that kind of thing. Rogue tiptoes on this line of like broken in the way it works.
It is a bit of a bummer because I just started playing Winifred and honestly, she doesn't seem super strong. So even a slight nerf to her is a bit of a bummer. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong, but like so far she's been pretty tough.
Yeah, I've been playing with Ian in our group that we've been Twitch streaming with, playing Winnie, and like, yeah, she feels. Playing her feels broken because she's drawing so many cards, drawing an Elder Sign and returning 3 skills to her hand, but getting all the text on them and that kind of thing. But the results are not over the top, right? Like she's drawing a lot of cards, making a lot of money. Partly Ian is very focused on making a lot of money because his weakness is an offer you can't refuse, which means that he needs to, and it has advanced to fine print, so to avoid dying, he needs to have 7 resources at all times to be ready to draw that. So that's part of what's holding Winnie back there. But yeah, that said, I would not have looked at this and thought, oh, nerf to Winnie. Like it's a level 5 skill that I guess she buys sometimes, but it's not.
Well, she's the only like skill rogue.
Yeah, she's like the succeed by rogue, which this is. Yeah. So
like Tony's gonna be spending his big XP on weapons.
Right. All right, then the Scroll of Secrets. From the multi-class card from the Circle Undone that was pretty bad. It's a Seeker and Mystic card that it used to sit in your hand slot and you could use an action to spend a secret from it to look at the bottom of an investigator's deck and manipulate where it returns to, either the player's hand, back to the bottom, or on top. And actually you could do that with the encounter deck as well. Now it's mutated to no longer take an action to use to spend its secret. You just exhaust it and spend the secret. Do you think this redeems the card?
Yeah, I think it's actually playable now. Yeah, the original made like no sense. It was like I'm going to spend an action to draw 1 card. Like I can already do that.
Yeah.
There were some certain like edge cases that you would kind of joke about it, like, oh, I have Doomed, and I'm just going to like Scroll of Secrets every turn to like potentially discard, but it's like in reality that's just not actually like doable. So I think it's actually playable now. I think I'm actually playing a group of 3 mystics for Iron Man next weekend, and we were talking about how we don't want to all play Arcane Initiate because then there might be too much Doom out.
Sure.
So like we're like, okay, some of us are going to play Scroll of Secrets as like additional draw.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, it is. It's not just manipulation and like and filtering what's on the encounter deck or what you might draw, but it is a draw. It's an efficient draw card, because if you just use it to draw 3 cards, you've spent 1 resource, and playing this to draw 3.
I think
that's great.
90% of the time, it's going to be pay 1 to draw 3, using a hand slot, which is not important in Mystic, maybe a little more important in Seeker, and then you with the like edge case that like, oh, you might every once in a while run into someone's weakness and discard it instead of drawing it. That's like a little added bonus.
Yeah. And you want to touch on, so this is a multi-class card that then had 2 upgrade paths into Seeker and Mystic. Want to touch on these?
Yeah, so I actually, to be honest, kind of forget what the what the upgraded versions do, because why would you ever spend XP on this?
Yeah.
So they both became fast actions.
Mm-hmm.
The Seeker one, you get 3 secrets, and you look at the bottom 3 cards of an investigator's deck, and then you may discard 1, you may add 1 to the hand, and you can place the rest on the top or bottom of the deck in any order. So it's a little bit like an old book of lore. You're searching through 3 cards.
Yeah, it increases the number of cards that you're looking at, so it kind of increases the like filtering your draws or manipulating the decks. It does not have any additional drawing of cards compared to the level 0 version.
Yes, so it now lets you, like, if there's 3 cards, obviously if any's a weakness, then you discard that. Mm-hmm. But if there's not, you select like what's the one that this person wants immediately, and they draw it. What's the one that they want soon? You put it on the top. Mm-hmm. And like, is there some that they don't want for a long time? You can put them on the bottom. So it's kind of cool, but it's still a bit of a stretch for 3 XP.
Yeah, I think for level 3, I wouldn't do this. I think that the level 0, just because it is now quite an efficient card, is pretty interesting, and the leveled up version doesn't bring enough new to the table.
Yeah, especially Seekers have a lot to spend XP on now.
Yeah, they sure do. Yeah. And then the Mystic... go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Mystic Scroll of Secrets, it looks at the top or bottom card of any investigator's deck, then discards it, adds it to their hand, puts it on the bottom or top. And it does have 1 more secret. Still, this seems like a stretch to level up to. Like, it's a better card than it was when it took an action, but I don't think I would spend my XP here.
Agreed. Yeah, just do the basic one. It is a slight nerf to Scroll of Prophecy, which came out from Mystic, was like a kind of a better version of Scroll of Secrets. And now it's maybe a little bit worse than Scroll of Secrets. Because that one, I think, drew 3 cards, but you discarded 1, so it's kind of like you spent an action to draw 2. Mm-hmm. But now, like, spending no action to draw 1
is very good. Yeah, that's a good point, and that's a fine card. Like when I don't know if I've ever used it, but when I've played with you and you used it, it seemed good.
Yeah, agreed.
And then the last card, kind of out of nowhere, is the 35 Winchester. Sorry, not last card. The last mutated card. It's a 5 ammo weapon that sits in 2 hand slots, spends an ammo, gives +2 combat, and then I believe this used to say if you drew a 0, a +1, or an Elder Sign, right? Yeah. So it kind of lined up with the Mystic spells that we got in Jacqueline's deck. Mm-hmm. It deals plus damage. Now it says a token with a non-negative modifier. My understanding is that this does basically one thing, and it's that this works with blessings now.
2 things. So he said it was for blessings and also for Jim. Now all the skulls count for this.
Right. Yeah. I think it said that. It called that out in the FFG.com article that introduced this. So it sets up this potentially pretty funny Jim archetype where he runs around with a giant scope. It's not scoped, but this giant rifle. Because he's got like 7 or 8 tokens in the bag now that add +2 damage. So I'm glad this happened. I wonder like why this, and I feel like there's plenty of other things that could have been tweaked to interact with blessings and curses in either a better way or a more intuitive way or something like that. I don't know why they like zeroed in on this one.
I think it's because this one was so bad, so they were like they were maybe looking at some way to boost it, and then someone was like, "Well, Innsmouth just came out, so like this could be a timely time to improve it in this way."
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess when you look at like Azure Flame and the other ones that have that 0+1 and Elder Sign rider that lined up with this before, they're better cards already.
Like
maybe they
Azure
don't need the
Flame,
buff. Yeah.
like you're plenty of Mystics want to third tripling. Like it's not going to have trouble finding.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then the grand finale. What's left?
Yeah. So our first banned card
Uh-huh.
is Double or Nothing. It's just nothing now, I guess.
Yeah. I actually kind of wish that they had like struck through double or on the title. Yeah, so what's changed on here is the word forbidden, kind of just in the card text, like a keyword or something. But what forbidden means is you cannot put this in your deck, and I guess that's what it means. I was gonna say, and you also cannot play it, but if it's not in your deck, that's
Yeah, it also says forbidden max 1 committed per skill test, which really should say max 0 committed per skill test.
it's yeah. Yeah, it's really everything past the word forbidden doesn't matter. Anyway, it could have just had the art and said forbidden and had that be the entire card text. Yeah, so double or nothing just broke the game in too many ways, I think.
Yeah, it's too bad because it's a really fun card.
Mhm.
I think, I was using it in a Forgotten Age campaign, and often we would like Double or Nothing a Storm of Spirits to do 4 damage to a bunch of enemies. Um, we almost always had to do something to make sure it succeeded, whether it was commit a Seal of the Elder Sign, which is 5 XP,
Mhm.
or um, you know, give a bunch of stat boosts, throw in a bunch of icons. So like there was always some work to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it was really fun when it worked out. That being said, I do understand as there are more cards with effects on them, like this only gets better. Like there's obviously way more skill cards that do cool stuff than there used to be. And
Yeah.
because each of those get doubled, it can be pretty nuts.
Right. Yeah, once you're doubling all in or something like that, you're drawing 10 cards or I think more than anything they could have kept doing, limit one per remove from the game after playing or that kind of thing to kind of keep plugging the holes in this boat. But ultimately I think that double or nothing meant that every time they designed a skill card, they had to consider what happens if this is doubled. Does it break the game? And I don't know what potential card mechanics or that kind of thing just couldn't exist alongside this that now can. So I think that's the main driver.
Yeah, I do think it was very thematic that like rogues had this like really swingy card,
Yeah.
And so I do hope in the future that there's something that kind of replaces this, like maybe it doesn't double all effects, but it doubles an effect or something, some other big benefit to succeeding on a really tough skill test.
Yeah, agreed. And it's maybe well, I was gonna say it's maybe a space an investigator can occupy, where like once per round when you pass a test, double the effects of a skill card in the something like that. But I don't know. Even when I say stuff like that, it sounds breakable. It sounds very fragile. I'll say.
Yeah, or like some effect that lets you kind of decide what the skill like how much to raise the difficulty, and then for every one that you raise the difficulty, if you succeed, you get a resource or something like that. Where it's like it's not just an unlimited number of possible effects, but there's at least some benefit to doing a really tough skill test.
Yeah. Well, I do think that the addition of a card to the forbidden list is likely to be followed up by an attempt to kind of provide players of the game with another card that captures why they liked this one, right? In just a less broken way. I don't know what that will be, but I can imagine that that's what is that they've set out to do, and we'll just have to see when and if that actually happens. Okay, that's the list. If you had asked me how many cards are on the taboo list, I would not have told you it's 27. That's if you combine chained and mutated and this one forbidden card. Like it's pretty long list. But what'd you think of the update, or what do you think of the state of the list?
I think it generally addresses sort of the overpowering nature of Seeker.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, yeah, sometimes they used Chained when I was maybe expecting Mutated. The other thing is, I'm actually kind of surprised Pathfinder's not in here. I think it's like really, really strong.
Pathfinder?
Or not Pathfinder, Safeguard.
Oh.
Like, Pathfinder's on here.
Yes.
I'm actually really surprised Safeguard is not.
Interesting. What would you would have put the level 2
Probably
version on?
Yeah, I think the level 0 is so new, and I don't know yet, like, kind of how overpowered it is. I haven't played it. But I think Safeguard 2 is clearly super strong. Like,
very
it can
strong.
give you 2 or 3 free actions. It can help you protect another character from enemies. So I would easily pay 3 or 4 XP for it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, what else would I think that most of the things that I would expect to be on the list and aren't are, or that, like, I think could have gone on the list and people, like, been fair, are just too much of staples. Like, I think deduction could cost an experience point, right? Like, there's a reason that Seekers only have to choose 28 cards for their deck and just always put in 2 deductions, because it's just so good. It's not breaking the game or anything, but I don't know, it's tricky because that would make level 0 Seekers a lot worse. But at the same time, I would love to. I mean, you can only put so many skill cards in a deck. Like, a lot of the time, it's like 4 or 6-ish skill cards. So to have 2 of them just always dedicated to deduction does get tiresome. So I don't know what the answer is, but I would like to see that little piece of the game's pie kind of shaken up in some way. Same goes for Vicious Blow. I guess maybe that's the other. It's not like all 5 classes core set skills fall into that bucket. I think it's Vicious Blow and Deduction that I would love to see some reason to reevaluate. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think we were talking about, like, the new Monster Slayer that came out with Nathaniel Joe. It's like, it's maybe as good as Vicious Blow in Nathaniel, but it's like so much worse than Vicious Blow in everyone else.
Right.
And Nathaniel's just going to play both. Like, it's an auto include.
Yeah, and I love, I've complimented I think maybe in our Innsmouth video, so they haven't gone up yet, but between Innsmouth and the Investigator starter decks, we got a lot of new econ events, like that series of new events like Sneak By that initiates an action and gives you 2 resources, that kind of thing. Like, for the first time, or like I didn't always play Emergency Cash, but I would say I played Emergency Cash in 95% of decks. And now for the first time, there are all these other options that are situationally better than Emergency Cash that now makes me feel like I have decisions to make for econ in my deck. I would love to see that happen for kind of some of these staple skills. I don't know how to accomplish it. Luckily, I'm not the one who's paid to do it. And then I think someday Charisma will hit this list. I don't think that this was the day. We saw that Miskatonic Archaeology funding that is a new way for Seekers to get ally slots that feels a little more tailored to building around it and to kind of the Seekers' way of approaching allies. And so I would love to see more classes get something like that, and then eventually Charisma can just be forbidden or something, because it's just such a boring must-have upgrade that's permanent, so it doesn't even it adds no variability to your game, because it doesn't come down to, well, what do I do if I draw it, what if I don't? Just nothing. I'm ready for it to go.
Yeah, I think if Guardian probably needs another way to get more allies besides just Leo Anderson, his signature, and at that point I do think something should be done about Charisma, because I agree that characters like Mark and Tommy need a way to play multiple allies. Like, Soak is a big part of their game, but the opportunity cost is pretty low. Like, I often just throw a bunch of allies in a deck and it's like, 3 XP for Charisma.
Right.
Pretty darn low cost.
Yeah, it really is. It's not expensive. And then and I think that's part of why, I mean, I guess I'm repeating what I said a minute ago, but it adds no variability. It's part of the power of permanent cards is that they are just always there. Any other card in your deck, it's great, but you have to either deal with, like, well, how do I make sure I draw it? Or what do I do if I don't draw it? is my whole plan to relying on that. And charisma just doesn't have that trade-off that is kind of inherent in card games. And yeah, so I don't know. I would like to see, I guess, more permanent cards. I guess I don't want to say like I want to convert my hand slots into allies. It's like I'm pulling a chariot or something. I guess that's not necessarily what I want. I don't know. Again, I'm only here to criticize, not to solve. So.
Yep.
Okay, well, I can see that it's gotten dark in the room you're in, and it's getting dark outside while I need to go barbecue some dinner. So let's wrap this up. Any final thoughts before we go?
Definitely excited to see how Seekers play with these changes.
Yeah.
I don't think any other classes are fundamentally changed.
Yeah, agreed. I think Seekers are going to feel worse, but I think they felt really good. So they're going to be a little more down to earth for sure. All right. Thank you for watching. If you have never seen us before, we don't only talk about obscure optional rules to games. We talk about the cards and we play the games on Optimal Play. So check out our channel. We'd love to have you subscribe and see what else we've got going. Steven, there we go. There he is. as he lights up. So Steven, thank you for joining me. We will hopefully now have a few weeks off before we got more videos to record. God willing.
Yep.
And until then, be optimal.